Welcome back to the show. We're going to be talking about handling change in the face of fear with Kyle Gray. And we'll also look about how he finds spirituality in his craft, no matter how mundane it may appear to others. And also a practice he has that brings more truth into his life and business that he does every morning. And we'll also look at how intuition was the driving force behind his 2 Amazon bestseller books. And if we get time, we'll hear some tips on how he does micro-digital nomading, even though he hasn't left the United States for several months. So welcome, Kyle.
Thanks so much for having me, Michaela. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited too. And for those of you who don't know Kyle, he's an entrepreneur and a best-selling author, and he helps people out with storytelling and content marketing. And I love his book, The Story Engine. We'll put that in the show notes, and definitely recommend checking it out. So let's just come back to that first point. You had a time in your business recently where you had some fear, and the fear wasn't because something terrible was going to happen. It was because something wonderful was going to happen.
Yeah. Speaking of stories, like I work with entrepreneurs on kind of the story they're telling all the time. But what's interesting is I try to use these same tactics on myself, and it becomes kind of a therapeutic thing from time to time, and just to kind of understanding what story you're telling yourself, because usually kind of the story you have about what's happening is very different from what you're feeling, is very different from what's really happening in reality in the world around you. And so, what we were chatting about was, my business has been growing a lot. I've been getting new opportunities. Thanks to the book, The Story Engine, I'm getting more attention and more authority. And so more people are starting to be interested in working with me. And I was actually putting together a proposal for a really big project that was going to be just a really big win for me. But I started feeling a lot of fear and a lot of uncertainty, and this was all happening like among the other changes. I was just moving, and I was preparing to go to an event in Colorado too. So there was just all these little things happening, and so I started feeling really nervous and started thinking things like, well, do I capacity to really take this person on? Am I organized enough? Am I going to be able to keep all my commitments? And I started worrying about those kind of things, and it just changed it from like an exciting new opportunity to like this kind of frightening burden. And I notice I do this all the time, especially if we were talking about just digital nomading. I notice I do this, especially when I'm about to travel to like go live in another country for a while, explore a new place. And I just think it's like, what I think I'm really feeling, or, the feeling I'm feeling could be interpreted in a lot of different ways. It could just as easily be interpreted as excitement and anticipation and like, wow, this is going to be great. Look at all these awesome things that are happening. But you've got to make sure that you're in control and you're aware of what story you're telling yourself. And usually if we don't choose the story, whether it's in whatever we're doing in our business and how we talk and share about what we do for our work, and in our own minds, we can control that story. We can control what we focus on. And it's something, of course, like I still need to practice on a lot, but it's been, bringing me these lessons often now. And when I can reframe the story, then it changes how I see everything.
So just remind us the story you're telling yourself about this, opportunity you had that you got worried about. What was the initial story?
The initial story was, I'm so busy already. I don't know if I have capacity to take on another client, but if I turn them away, then, I'm going to miss this huge opportunity too. So you're like, it was just like, between a rock and a hard place, or at least that was kind of the unenlightened perspective that I had. And so from there, I had to just take a step back and reframe how I was seeing it. And I was lucky enough. I was chatting with a close friend of mine just about this, who's works with a lot of entrepreneurs, really brilliant guy. And he was saying, you know, like what you're experiencing right now is you should be grateful for this, because for a long time when we were just getting our businesses, we're just like, just need money, resource, we need to get some cash. Now you're past that state. Now your energy and are scarce resources, so you need to learn how to handle those better. And so from now, that I really about either an cause had to go up into orbit for nearly a month. And as he went up, and he kept hearing the tapping, tap, 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 and it was just this consistent, sure was machine. But as he was listening to it, he came to these crossroads where he was like, either I'm going to fall in love with this sound, or it's going to drive me crazy. And he made the conscious choice to just fall in love with it and enjoy it. And so my friend encouraged me to do the same thing. Like, you know, this feeling that you're going to have, that you're having right now, it's part of being an entrepreneur. And so you can either, you know, embrace it the way and know that this is part of growth, and that this is part of the journey, and love that the journey you're on, or you can let it drive you crazy. And so just from that perspective and having that, I was able to step back and really see, wow, yeah, like if I just change the story just a little bit in my head, it transforms it from just something, you know, this challenge, this rock in a hard place, to this incredible opportunity that I'm grateful for. And that brings in, once you start feeling grateful for it and encouraged about it, then that brings in a lot of new options. It makes it easier, instead of focusing on, oh, do I have enough capacity, or to, hey, let me chat with my assistant and make sure we have everything outlined and lined up so that I can clean up what I'm doing with my current businesses, get more organized, and increase my capacity.
That is great that you could do that. And just by changing the story, it totally changed not only how you felt, but also how you acted.
Absolutely. Yeah. It gave me different options to notice that I couldn't have seen from thinking from a place of fear and a place of uncertainty, were just sitting right in front of my face.
Mm. And something you told me earlier about the reason why we feel bad. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So something I've been doing recently is I've become increasingly concerned or interested in my own health. I've been taking a lot of blood tests and trying to study how my body's working. And I've learned recently that I have something called Hashimoto's disease. And I also learned recently that I see a pattern that I have elevated, like slightly above normal cortisol levels in the morning. And so then these things usually happen in the morning. They usually happen right when I wake up. First thing in the morning, I have extra cortisol in my system for whatever reason. But so I feel stress. But then I just feel a stress. But then your mind, when it feels the stress, then it comes in and is like, okay, well, let me tell you why you're feeling the stress. And then these extra stories come in where I'm like, oh, I'm excited about this big opportunity. I got to get this proposal in. And so that's when it moves in, and now it's saying like, well, you're feeling stressed because of this, but I'm really not. I'm feeling stressed because just my body chemistry is working a little bit differently. And I have just a thyroid issue that makes me a little more susceptible to anxiety. And so when I come from that perspective and just understanding my body and how it's working, then I can say, although it doesn't, this is challenging to really change the story when you're right in the moment, right in the heat of it. But I can say to myself now, look, Kyle, I know that this feels so real right now, but just try to give yourself a little bit of love, because you know that in the mornings you have like a slightly elevated level of cortisol. So you're feeling this right now, but just get through the day, get a little bit of food in you, go on a walk, and you don't have to stay stuck in this feeling. And the story that you're telling yourself of why you have this feeling is separate from what you're actually feeling, what's actually happening to you. And I think that that's a really powerful thing to start to recognize, just the story and your experience, what's actually happening.
Yeah, the reason you feel bad is different than the story you tell yourself about why you feel bad.
Yeah. And so
that's a subtle difference, but very important.
Absolutely. Because you can always find a reason to condemn yourself for why you're feeling bad, but you don't have to. There's always, there's just a super, most of the time it's really easy to find negative thoughts to fill in these things, but it's also possible to choose and change the story that you're experiencing.
Yeah, and I would probably use the what would it take question there. What would it take to feel good about this situation? What would it take to feel good that I've got the opportunity to win this big new project? And see what my intuition had to say.
Yeah. Another great intuitive exercise that I actually learned from our mutual friend, Jeremy Ginsberg. I can't remember what he called it. It sounded similar to my name, Kaluga or something. But he was just like, all right, here's an exercise. You're going to talk to me as if what we were just saying, or as if, the proposal, you were in the future and it's already happened and we're just catching up. So what that looks like is, oh, hey, Jeremy, that proposal I was talking about last week? Well, I nailed, and it was great. Like, they paid me more than I expected. And I also, not only that, but I also figured out exactly how I was going to handle onboarding them and managing a lot of this work. And so I talk as if it had already happened, and I talk as if the best case scenario already happened. And that just, again, makes me feel like it helps me feel better about the situation. And just talking like it's already happened and like it believes it makes it, changes how you feel about it and changes what options you can see, and really helps you get even a little more clear on what you want, instead of focusing on like, oh, how am I ever going to do this? Then I can say like, wow, I've already solved this problem. And just by like acting like the problem was solved and talking about it in as much detail as possible, it gives you actually can come up with these answers intuitively sometimes.
That is a great technique. And, I've used that with my staff in the past, where I'd have them at the end of the year write a letter from their future self for the upcoming year about all the great things they did and how they did them and how they felt. And it's amazing how much it helped them achieve their goals easier and faster. So I love that. And, we're talking about change in your business. Is there some way your intuition helps you deal with your change?
Yeah, I would say so. This kind of goes into one of the other talking points is about morning pages. What I usually do with it when I'm kind of like facing changes in my business, facing my intuition, is I think a lot of us, I definitely fall into this category, but I rely on my mind a lot. I try to do a lot of things mentally, rationally. And it by one exercise I can do to just get myself out of my mind and just kind of let whatever's happening just pour out of me is in the morning pages. So like, first thing I'll do in the morning is I'll just start writing, and I'll let myself write whatever I want. It can be, sometimes they're ugly thoughts, sometimes they're grateful thoughts, sometimes it's whatever I'm worried about in the morning. Since I have like the extra cortisol in the mornings, they're usually a little bit stressful thoughts, but I just dump them out on the page, and then I can see like, oh, this is really what's happening. But I try and filter myself at all. So whatever's there will just rise to the top. And just by like writing it and getting it out there, then you can see it and review it, or just having it out like allows you to have that extra clarity and to get that extra. Then you can start, once you've cleared out all of this junk, then you can start letting your intuition guide you a little bit more, because you've stopped. I feel like when you're trying to be, just really intelligent in your head, you filter yourself a lot. You're like, oh, well, I'm feeling this, but actually, like, strategically it doesn't work, or whatever. But if you just can allow yourself to just dump out a lot of thoughts and figure out kind of all this extra stuff that's going on, then it lets the voice of intuition rise to the top.
And do you personally handwrite these, or you speak them, or you type them?
Yeah, I handwrite them. I try to write 3 pages every day. I've got just like I go through journals like candy these days, but like it's just, it's just simple. Just write out 3 pages. And it's also, you got to be careful. Like last time, this is funny. So this is a brand new one, and this is a little bit bigger than the journal I had before. So 3 pages is a lot harder on this one. But so it's funny that, I had like a little smaller one, and you could get through 3 pages pretty fast, but now it's an extra, it's like a level up challenge. But yeah, so just writing those down in the morning, like, helps you, especially as like a writer. I don't want to, it gets my sensor mind out of the way. And so that allows that intuition and that good stuff inside you to really start to sound out.
Now, I first heard about morning pages from a book by Julia Cameron. I think it was The Artist's Way. Oh yeah,
that's where I got it.
Yeah, I was curious whether you got it somewhere else. And great book. So I'll put a link to her morning pages.
That's brilliant. And there's like just what I was just describing is just the beginning of all of the amazing stuff about really connecting with your artistic self in that. And I think it's an incredible read.
Excellent. So one other thing with, I think a lot of people get fear and anxiety and worry when they're faced with changes in their business. And do you feel the pace of change is slowing down or speeding up, or?
Yeah, I think it's changing more and more. I think, it's interesting where I feel like a lot of the time I've read a lot about this, but just like technology is evolving quickly. Things are the market and the opportunities for just as an entrepreneur, I'm like looking around in this all the time, but like, the landscape's changing so fast and things are happening so fast that we actually must rely on our intuition these days, because we really things change so fast that we can't even mentally process them, where we as humans like to see things as linear. We see things as linear beings, but the change is happening exponentially. So our brains aren't really, at least our kind of conscious minds aren't able to navigate the fast changing world very much anymore. And so I think intuition is essential. Another really, really cool book that I've read that dives right into this topic is called Flash Foresight. And I can't remember who the author is, but he gives you like a lot of different ways to kind of rethink the problem and gives you like a perspective into the future to see things a little bit differently.
It looks like a Mr. Burris is the person. Yes. Daniel Burris. There we go. Thank you, Google search. Instantly answering that question. I'll put it in the show notes so that folks can find it. So is there any other way you deal with all this change going on, or?
Let's see. So I think I think one of the best ways that I deal with it and I understand it is really, again, I'm kind of told a couple of stories about this. I was chatting with Jeremy. But I think just being able to open up to somebody else and just be like, hey man, I'm really feeling like this right now. I'm feeling uncertain. How do I handle all this? And just getting a human connection, and just like similar to being in the morning pages, just talking the situation through helps bring out the good insights and helps me get clarity on it. Even, no matter who's listening, just being able to get it out of your head and share it with somebody helps you listen to it and process it a little bit better. So there's not just these kind of, I just like call them like little demons of thought running around in your mind anymore.
Yeah, I mean, either a friend who is able to listen well, or a coach. Can be on the phone or in person. And I guess the morning page is almost writing to yourself, so
definitely.
It's getting out of your head, so you can see more clearly what those little demon thoughts are. So cool. So let's move on to looking at finding spirituality in your business. Because, many people may think that, oh, my business is so mundane, it's not even spiritual at all. What's your thought on that? And I know you wrote about this recently.
So I think this is a pretty exciting thing that is really, again, it's kind of like a deeper storytelling method. But what happened, this all kind of came into my mind about how to find spirituality in your craft, whatever it is, when I was sitting at a coffee shop here in Salt Lake City, Utah. And this old man, who I actually really admired, because he was like maybe 80 years old. And I heard that he does like 20-mile bike rides in a day, and he just got a hip replacement, and he's just moseying into the coffee shop with a cane and a giant book on Latin, like a huge ancient tome that you'd find in you think you'd find in a Harry Potter movie or something. And so he sits down and sips on his coffee, and he ends up overhearing me chatting with somebody else saying, hey, I'm a writer, blah, blah, blah. And so he moseys his way over to me and is like, oh, I heard you're a writer. What do you write about? And I said, oh, well, I write about business and how help businesses grow with just helpful blog posts and articles and books. And well, looks at me like I just punched him in the stomach. And he's like, oh, well, why don't you write something, valuable that will actually, make an impact on this world? Why don't you write about spirituality or love or poetry or anything like that? Why don't you make some real valuable use out of these skills? And I was like stunned by this. I wasn't really sure how to respond, but it stuck with me for a while. And I was like, well, I really disagree with this guy, but I don't know why. And so I started thinking about it, and it kind of reminded me of I was also a musician when I was younger. I still am now. But when I was younger, I was certain the only way that I was going to live a happy and fulfilled life was by, writing music that changed people, that helped people, good lyrics that changed their lives, and melodies that they enjoyed. After reflecting on that, and I thought that was something spiritual to me, where I could connect to it and just get lost in it. And I found it again in writing, in the interim between trying to, become a rock star. And somehow I ended up instead of performing for an audience at whatever Red Rocks, I just have an audience of people showing up to my blog posts, reading my content. And instead of lyrics, I'm writing helpful articles that change people's lives, but I'm still trying to create the same emotional, helpful experience that I was doing. And so I found that my core craft, my writing was a spiritual practice to me. It was something I needed to show up and do every day to really keep sharp. It was something that I needed to It was something that, it was a skill I needed to develop. It's not easy to write well, and even, you know, no matter how many times no matter how many things you've published or how many words you've written, writing a first draft of anything is always a bit of a challenge. And so as and so what I started to realize was, you know, I started to see the spirituality in it, and I started to see like heaven, instead of heaven as something that's high away in some distant land. I kind of see heaven as a raw material inside of you, inside of your soul. And you know, your spirituality is figuring out, is mastering your craft, and through your craft you get to bring your little slice of heaven to the earth and make the world a better place. And so by doing that, you really, the faith in this kind of spirituality is just showing up and you know, writing in the morning, or practicing what you're doing, practicing your business or your core craft, whatever it is that is your inner genius. Practicing that is how you grow your faith, and you bring heaven to the earth. And I think that that's what, you know, this world needs most right now. I think a lot of people talk about you know, the environmental crisis happening right now, where our natural resources are running out in some areas, or pollution's happening here. But I think that there's an equally powerful, yet not so widely discussed, human resources crisis, where a lot of us aren't connected with you know, some kind of craft that allows us to bring heaven out inside of us. And I think there's a lot of brilliant, you know, there's a lot of geniuses out there that you know, are just, there's Einsteins and Mozarts and you know, any other kind of brilliant poets or scientists out there that just haven't really connected with what's inside of them. And so I think it's important. And I think, you know, if everybody could do that, though this is definitely like highly aspirational, but if we could really connect with our purpose and what's inside of us, I think that we could bring a lot to this world.
I think that's a great thing to say, and we'll link in the blog article you had on finding spirituality in your craft in the show notes, because it's a good read and talks about this further. Yeah, I mean, I think really God or the universe or whatever you want to call it is really in everything. You know, the force is in everything, to use a Star Wars term. And even if you have, quotes, a mundane business, you know, there still is that God energy in it, as long as you let it, you know, blossom and be aware of it, you know, and appreciate it. So I know it's sometimes hard to see if it's some area of your business that is not maybe your favorite area. You know, perhaps you don't like marketing, or perhaps you don't like bookkeeping, but someone else really loves that. And if you just delegate the task to them, they can make that area of your business blossom. So, which is, you know, one of the reasons for hiring other people, you know, who have complementary skills to you, that they can bring that life force into that area of the business that was a bit of a drag for you. So,
yeah, it definitely feels like heaven when you get somebody on your team that is doing like their craft, that is what they're, you know, their direct link to heaven. When they can bring in what's best about them, you'll know it right away in your business.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not necessarily what task that you're doing in your business, it's the energy you bring to it. I remember reading this, I forget which book it was in, but it was one of Tony Robbins' books, and he was saying how he was at some retreat, and he had to do the dishes for 4 hours a day. And when he started, he was like, "This really sucks. I came here to be at a retreat, you know, not to do dishes." And he had all this negative junk. And then he did, like you were saying earlier, a reframe, and he like got into a space of being present in the current moment and being grateful for what he was doing. And then he got to really enjoy doing this task that previously had been, you know, dragging him down. Now he found it uplifting. So the story we tell ourselves makes so much difference there. It's amazing.
Yeah. I think
go ahead.
Sorry. So I guess along with that, the story, like again, we've talked about a lot of the negative ways that it can impact us, but by creating it's possible to create your own story by just saying like, just getting clear on what your mission is, and I think like especially in creating content or writing for people, you want to connect with a higher purpose, something, a vision, or oftentimes when I'm working with people that work with me, we'll develop something called a big, hairy, audacious goal, which is it's like a 10-year out goal. And it's something like, it's so ambitious and it's so crazy, but how do you want to like impact the world? I want to help 10,000 entrepreneurs impact 1 billion people with storytelling. I want to help 1 million people get on, make $1 billion through public speaking, or, just these huge numbers that you're like, when you first see them, you're like, wow, how am I ever going to do that? But by connecting with that, by creating goals like that, then you start to create a storyline for your business that other people can follow, especially if they're measurable, like really saying like, I want 10,000 people. You can create a graph of that and report on, I sold X number of books this month, and I know that that's helped that many people. I've impacted this. I spoke in front of this many people, and so I'm on my way to whatever. And so you can share that, and not only does that help give you extra meaning and you extra power and you extra energy in what you're doing and why you're doing it, just like reframing how Tony Robbins does the dishes. It can also help other people. You can enlist other people in this vision that you have for the world. When somebody is like, I have this goal and I want to achieve it, and somebody can be like, well, I love that goal and I want to be, one person of the 10,000 to join this. I want to take a part in this. And I think that's, so stories are, equally powerful, motivating and energizing as they are troubling sometimes if you don't control them.
One of the things that occurred to me while you were talking about that is this disconnection from spirit is something that affects a lot of people in society. This feeling lack of meaning and listlessness or lack of joy. And there's a phrase that we use in the Kundalini yoga world. We refer to that as cold depression, because it's not regular depression, because you don't necessarily feel depressed, but you feel disconnected from the meaning in your life. So anything you can do to reconnect with your intuition or reconnect with spirit can really help with that. And I put a link into cold depression for people who haven't heard of that phrase, and it has some yogic suggestions for dealing with that. But if you're feeling it, just going out into nature is a good way to deal with feeling that disconnection.
It's one of my favorite things, and it's one of the reasons why I love living in Salt Lake City, Utah right now. Is nature is always very, very easy to access.
Well, we'll talk about how you have a little trick for doing that in a moment, but let's just talk about the 2 books you've written and how your intuition played into you creating those and being the driving force for you writing them. So is it the case that you didn't know you were going to write the book, and then your intuition kind of tapped you on the shoulder and said, hey, Kyle, you need to do something here?
Yeah, it was definitely how the universe worked for me. So my first book, The College Entrepreneur, was actually, before it was a book, I tried to make an online course. And I had tried a couple of times to put it together. I was actually doing it in Thailand once. I recorded the whole thing on an island on Koh Phangan. And I put it all together, and then when I had listened to it, I turned up the volume a little bit more, and I started hearing all of these random jungle noises in the background of my course, and it was just it wasn't working. Back to the drawing board. Didn't want to. I put it away for a while, then tried again, and then re-recorded it all. And this time I was in Chiang Mai, and I would pull up blanket over my head and like talking to the mic, so it was just perfectly good audio quality. But I didn't feel like it, like the title of the course was a mouthful, and it was just, I didn't feel like it really connected. And so again, I had kind of like felt like that was a failed project. And right near the end of leaving Chiang Mai, this amazing guy, James Schramko, reached out to me, and he's like, hey, I know somebody named Chandler Bolt who needs some help with his content. You should get in touch with him. And so Chandler Bolt runs a company called Self-Publishing School, and it's all about how to write your own book. And so I helped him put together his content marketing strategy. I helped him hire somebody on his team to help handle the content too. And so by like digging into his brand, digging into what he does, seeing his success stories, I started thinking, well, I actually could write a book. I thought it would be like years before I wrote a book, you know, is all these limiting beliefs of like, well, I have to be way smarter or way cooler or have more experience, you know, to write a book before it'll do anything. But then after working with Chandler, I was like, maybe I can, you know, just maybe. So, and so that's when I, you know, the idea that's still behind the college entrepreneur was something I had felt really strongly about, and I felt like I needed to share that, but I didn't know how. Because I see like there was kind of a middle ground I wanted to cover, where there's either like, at least, especially in the entrepreneur community, there's like drop out and start your own business and learn from the school of hard knocks, which I think is very appropriate in some cases. And then there's just kind of the business as usual, just get good grades and a degree and everything will be fine, which I don't actually think is the case very often anymore. But so my take was, you know, there's a lot of stuff that's valuable that's happening between classes and between your grades that you can take advantage of. There's money laying on the table right here, that students aren't using. And so I wanted to share that. I just had to say it, but it wasn't connected with anything I do as a business. I didn't have any plan to do it other than I was like, I need to make this statement. But it was good enough that like, and I had outline. So I wrote the book, and just the process of writing this first book gave me the courage and the understanding. Oh, now I know how to write a book. And I've also got to give a hat tip to Dan Norris in this, because while working with him at WP Curve in the past, I got to see how his process for writing a lot of other books. Like the 7-Day Startup.
He's a book machine, man.
He's crazy. He's amazing. So I learned a tremendous amount from him, and I think just like knowing him and working with him probably like impacted and developed my intuition. So I felt like I could write my book. But on the second one,
have you read his book on creating and writing that he put out last year?
I read a few chapters. I haven't gone through the full thing yet, but I loved. I've been following it on Instagram. I love the quotes that he's been putting up, and he pretty much wrote the book, you know, through Instagram quotes, which was I thought it was brilliant. But yeah. So I think it's a super good book.
Yeah, it's called Create versus Hate for people who can't find Dan's Instagram.
Yeah. So with the second one, the story engine, I learned a really great technique from Chandler Bolt, which I think is a really fun way to kind of let your intuition guide you. And he calls it mind mapping. And I'll put a scan up on this in the show notes, or we'll take a bigger picture of this, but I'll show it in the video now. So it's just right here is like the center where I just wrote the title, the story engine. And then I started saying, okay, well, I want to cover a couple of key points in here. And I just started letting, just drawing the core ideas, and then started like attaching little extra ideas to it. And I just kind of let it flow, let my mind kind of dump out whatever it was. And so I got a lot of different ideas in here, and put it all together. But I was just kind of following my intuition, but it created an entire outline for a book, which I used. You know, if you actually had a chance to like compare a lot of these notes in here, with the actual like table of contents of the story engine, you'll find they line up perfectly. And it was just with the mind mapping exercise, you know, it just lets it all come out instead of, you know, I think a lot of people just try to brute force a book and they're like, okay, well, I'm going to write a book today. We'll start with chapter 1. Here we go. But I don't think that'll wear you out fast. But if you have a plan that you can create with this mind map, you can do this. You know, you can come up with an amazing book in less than an hour with a good mind mapping exercise. You know, you of course have to write it, but if you've got it in you.
Yeah, no, mind mapping is great. I mean, that was popularized by Tony Bazan 40 years ago, I guess. And it does seem to like help you come up with ideas that if you wrote out your outline linearly, they wouldn't come in because you can see connections between different places. And it's not the mind map you showed us had a lot of text in it, but you can have little diagrams or cute, you know, icons or whatever that you put in there. And I think it's cool that you hand drew your mind map. I think that can allow for a lot more creativity. But there is also mind mapping software out there that people use as well, and I've used. So really cool way to tap into your intuition and your rational mind at the same time. So as you were writing the story engine book, did you get any writer's block, or did it just kind of flow out, or?
I would get writer's block. Usually what would happen is there was definitely like once I had this outline, I built out kind of the map of the book in Trello. And you know, there were definitely times how I dealt with writer's block was usually I avoided it, where I would like pick out the chapters that I wanted to do more. And so then there were just a couple, so like the last couple of chapters were maybe a little bit more of a slog. And so what I would for that, if a chapter was just like not working for me, is I would try to write the first paragraph. I would go into the chapter and I'd be like, okay, just write the first paragraph, maybe the last paragraph, or at least to start at it. And then I would be like, okay, I got that. And sometimes that would be enough to beat it. Sometimes I'd be like, okay, well, at least I have that, and I'll go away to a chapter I want to do more right now. So I do that, and I feel like I make progress. But it just by getting this was something I used to do in school with my papers too. Just by getting that first paragraph down, it allows your mind to start kind of working on it on its own and really starting to visualize things. And I think that getting that extra clarity makes a huge difference in how empowered you feel to write it or handle it. So I could come back the next day or maybe a couple of days later, and the writer's block wouldn't be there as much. Or, you know, another easy thing would be like, okay, well, you know, maybe I just don't have enough research on this. So I do research and drop in a couple of links and drop in a couple of quotes, and they would be messy or whatever, but at least I would have a couple more tools to bring to the table this time.
I love that suggestion. You said just work on the chapter that you feel inspired by, instead of feeling you've got to write chapter 1 and chapter 2 and 3. You know, if this morning chapter 7 is the one that's like really filling you with joy, write that and then come back and fill in the other ones later. I mean, you know, it doesn't matter these days. I guess in the old days when you would people typed books, maybe it sort of mattered more, but with word processors, who cares what order you write stuff in?
Exactly. Yeah. I was all over the place. Did not write the book from front to back. It was chapter 7, then 20, then 18, then 4, then I was all over the place. And it was fine because it was all mapped out. It was all organized. And so all I had to do was it made it easy to manage. And so instead of seeing like a whole book, I was just writing a chapter at a time.
That is so cool. So you mentioned before we got on the interview that you do micro digital nomading, even though you're not like traveling around the world right now in your life. You're in the US, but you still manage to do some nomad stuff. Tell us how you do that.
Yeah, so we've met just kind of you and I have met like in Colombia, in Thailand, and all kinds of wild places around the world. And kind of the traveling entrepreneur was the thing that got me into entrepreneurship in the first place. And I came back to Utah about I've been here for about a year. And I have friends and family here, and I really enjoy it. But I've still been able to bring a lot of kind of the things I've learned while traveling all around the world to really enjoy a lifestyle here in Utah. And so how I do that, especially in the winter, is so I ski at a ski resort called Snowbird, and it's kind of a competitive place. Like the elite skiers go there and they want to ski all the great powder, and so it kind of is rough to go there in the winds because everybody is getting really competitive, and you got to like sharpen your ski poles to get anything. And so when I knew this, like I would, or if I knew that a good snowstorm was coming during a weekday, I'd set my alarm extra early, like 5 a.m., and then do a couple hours of work right away in the morning, and then drive up to the ski resort from like 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Right when it opened, and get a bunch of turns in on a weekday. And then I could just crack open my laptop up at the ski lodge and order lunch, and then put in another couple of hours of work. And so I was able to get to like live a little bit of a lifestyle during my weekdays, do what I loved, but also still be able to keep up with my business at the same time. And so I've just taken a lot of the ideas of like what we've brought to working remotely or living in Chiang Mai or living lean. I have a full office set up complete with like podcasting or like lights that I can bring and put in like my tiny little day bag. And so I've optimized it for to be, just totally mobile. And so I can, my office can be a ski lodge. My office can be a coffee shop down in Salt Lake City, or it can be in a coffee shop in Chiang Mai, which I hope it will be all of those things again in the future and more.
That is so cool and inspiring. So many of us are able to do that now, just work from a laptop. So I just want people to think, what could they do with that to shake things up? Because I find when I work in different locations, it gives me more creativity and, new ideas come to me. So very cool. So let's just switch gears a bit now. And I'm kind of curious, why you're proud to use your business intuition.
Why am I proud?
Yeah.
Well, I think like, again, in this, I'm proud because, I think that there's a lot more to us than I think we understand. And as somebody who like, I have studied a lot and I read a lot. And so it's really hard to get out of your head sometimes, but by connecting with that, I think you connect with something. I think intuition is something bigger than what's inside of us. And I think it allows us to kind of connect with the whole world. And so I'm proud of that because I think like it connects me with that bigger story that's happening. And it helps me to find my own story, and it shows me, a lot of the stuff like, intuition is playing a huge role in my life because, a lot of like, if I always like look back on myself a year before, and it's been happening, for the last decade, but, I would have expected to see myself, where I am now. And I'm sure like when I see myself a year in the future from now, I'm not going to believe what's happening. And I think a lot of that is just, it's trusting my intuition. It's trusting my adventure. It's going with the gut. And like, you'll have to make I can think of a couple of like, just essential decisions where you were like, oh, God, I'm not sure, but I think like my intuition is really pulling this way. So let's go for it. That have, turned out to be, some of the best choices.
That is great. So, I'm on a mission that all entrepreneurs openly use their intuition at work because they'll make more money and be happier. And also because I think if every business leader used their intuition openly, they'd make less dumbass decisions that hurt other people and hurt the planet. So my question to you to close this interview is, what would it take to make business intuition more openly used this year?
I think it's great to start with vulnerability, and I think it's a common question that a lot of people are having right now. But I think vulnerability, the precursor of vulnerability is honesty. And to be, whether you're writing in your morning pages, whether you're talking with a friend, whether you're talking with your coach, whether, you're writing a blog post, just being honest with yourself and what's happening, and being vulnerable with who you are, and really being transparent and real, and just getting down to what's clearly happening is what will define you, or it'll allow you to have that intuition instead of feeling kind of stuck and torn up. But if you have the courage to really reach out to a friend and say, hey, I'm having a really tough day, I don't know what I'm going to do, and just start starting talking through it, by being vulnerable, you allow that intuition, you allow that spirit to come into you.
That is great. So if folks want to find you online, how can they best do that, Kyle?
So right now I'm writing a lot at thestoryengine.co, and I've got really cool infographics on storytelling and how to create stories that engage your customers and their imagination, how to build relationships with content marketing, and all kinds of good stuff. So definitely check me out there. If you'd like to see a little more of kind of my personal writing, though I haven't updated it that much recently. I've been doing a lot of work on the story engine, but my personal writing about how to find spirituality in your craft, or just kind of the inner battles that I go through, you can check me out at kylegray.io. And we'll include, I'm on Twitter at Kyle the Gray. And I'm happy to connect with anybody there. Share your story with me. I'm excited to hear it.
That's fabulous. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Kyle.
It's been an honor, Michaela.